Plastics are one of the greatest scientific accomplishments in human history. Change my mind. What it do? I'm Lumi, and welcome to the Benchtop, the best science show on YouTube, not empirically, of course. Now, when we think of the term plastics, what is the first thing that comes to mind? For many of us, the first image is probably one of these, a plastic bottle. Depending on your perspective, this plastic bottle is either the bane of human existence or one of the greatest scientific accomplishments in human history. And it's crazy if you think about it, how a simple plastic bottle can represent both of these things. But to understand how we got to this point, we have to start from the beginning. Now, until the late 1800s, humans were limited in what we could make. From the Stone Age to the Industrial Revolution, we built our lives around natural resources. For instance, if you were going to settle your own city, it would be a good idea to start with some water and wood. Access to natural resources like metal, wood, stone, bone, leather, and so on are paramount. And though a lot has been created throughout human history with these natural resources, they aren't perfect. Now, we obviously survived just fine on this type of system, but there is no way life as we know it today could exist like this. So for us to get from the 1800s to today required a radical shift in where we get our raw materials. With the first industrial revolution in the 1830s and 40s, the United States and Europe saw a huge boom in their ability to mass produce products that were traditionally handmade. This boost in production caused a shift in our mentality, changing us from being self-producers to consumers. But though the availability of common things like clothes and food were increasing, there was still the issue of being restricted to the confines of what nature could provide, something the game of pool would actually change forever. The term plastic means pliable and easily shaped, but nowadays it's synonymous with cheap, durable materials that are synthetic or non-natural. In reality, plastics are polymers, which are just many small molecules that are stitched together through chemical bonds. When we join smaller molecules together, they gain additional properties that make them strong, lightweight, and extremely versatile. Though plastics are polymers, all polymers are not plastic. If you think back to your middle school biology days, you probably remember learning that one of the main differences between animal cells and plant cells is that plant cells have a cell wall. This cell wall is made of cellulose, which is a natural polymer called a polysaccharide. Now, polysaccharides are polymers that are made of thousands of sugar molecules, mostly glucose in the case of cellulose. This natural polymer is found in most plants and is the primary building block of things like cotton. But though cotton is a type of polymer, it isn't plastic. See, plastics are materials that are man-made and don't exist in nature. So though things like DNA, natural rubber, and cotton are polymers, they exist naturally and thus are not plastic. It's just like saying orange juice is a beverage, but not all beverages are orange juice. But back to the bullet point I made earlier. In 1867, a man by the name of John Hyatt, no relation, invented the first synthetic plastic while trying to win a $10,000 cash prize for creating a replacement for ivory. This was because billiard balls at the time were made from the ivory of elephant tusks, which was not only unsustainable, it's a PETA nightmare. To circumvent this issue, John Hyatt took nitrocellulose and reacted it with camphor oil to create celluloid. This new material simulated many of the characteristics of ivory and became one of the first known plastics. But like with most inventions, marketing started to make some big promises about celluloid. Though celluloid tried to stop the mass extinction and chill craze of the 1800s, advertisements pitched early plastics as the savior of the environment. That didn't end well, did it? Turns out, celluloid was just the beginning of what would turn into a $1.1 trillion industry. Shortly after the creation of celluloid, a new plastic called Bakelite took center stage in the 1900s. Bakelite wasn't just a modification of a natural polymer like celluloid was. It was a completely synthetic polymer that was ready for the mass production spotlight. See, though celluloid had its uses, its versatility was quite limited compared to Bakelite. Invented by Leo Baekeland in 1907, Bakelite was durable, lightweight, and heat resistant, which made it perfect to be mass produced into everything from jewelry to telephones. And thus, Bakelite was the real push that spurred research into creating new plastics to replace natural raw materials. And like the saying goes, necessity is the mother of all invention. In the 1900s, necessity was at an all-time high during World War II. At the time, natural resources were scarce due to the war effort, since the United States had a sudden need for metal to produce tanks and airplanes, food to feed millions of soldiers, and equipment for soldiers to use in battle. So there was a big push to find alternatives to scarce natural resources, and man, did plastics deliver. Over the course of World War II, plastic production grew by 300%, and we saw the invention of many new synthetic plastics. There was nylon, which was used for things like toothbrushes and parachutes for soldiers. There was neoprene that was used to make gloves and shoes. There was even plexiglass, which was used to replace the glass needed for windshields of planes. But the growth didn't stop with invention. It continued on the production side as well, as companies like DuPont, Ford, and General Electric made a lot of money during this time. And when the war was over, many companies weren't going to let that money train stop. In fact, World War II is what made the plastics industry as we know it possible. When the war was over, there was a mad scramble to find even more uses for these plastics by creating cheap replacements for products traditionally made from natural resources. Over the next 50 years, plastics became ubiquitous, and so did our need to throw them racks. With the increase of household income after the Great Depression and World War II, Americans bought up plenty of plastic products because it was cheap and lasted just as long as we needed it to. I mean, think about it. You and all the homies from Cali to New York could walk into a clothing store and buy the exact same outfit. Buying one of a kinds was now a choice, not a necessity. As put by author Susan Frankel, in product after product, market after market, plastics challenged traditional materials and won. In a short amount of time, plastic products were everywhere, and just like with celluloid, they promised to make products that couldn't be replicated with natural resources. Everyday people could now have bigger homes, fancier wardrobes, and drive nicer cars. In other words, you could finally have your cake and eat it with a plastic fork too. Plastics were the world-changing material that could satisfy the needs of humans everywhere. But as I said before, marketing and advertising was soon in opposition to reality. The increase in plastic production wasn't just noticed at the local Hot Topic. In the latter half of the 1900s, people started to notice that all this plastic consumption was starting to pile up in more places in people's homes. It was ending up in our oceans, and it wasn't going away either. By the 1970s, plastics went from being heralded as the miracle material to being viewed as an environmental catastrophe. According to the plastic industry, the issue of plastic pollution is you. Instead of throwing out your big gulp on the highway like a barbarian, you should recycle your plastic like an upstanding citizen.
Okay.
See, recycling was pitched as a cure-all for plastics. It made it seem like we could keep buying what we wanted while saving Shamu. But the reality is recycling doesn't work nearly as well as it was pitched to be. In 2018, the EPA says plastics made up almost 20% of landfills. Specifically, that was 27 million tons of plastic, or 165 pounds for every US man, woman, and child. By the way, that doesn't include the stuff that we shipped overseas. The problem with recycling doesn't start with not recycling enough. It's actually a problem of chemistry. First, there are so many different types of plastic you can find in your home. Here are just a few I found in mine. Many of these products are made of multiple types of plastic, which is the first problem. Take this water bottle for instance. Seems innocent enough to recycle. However, this plastic bottle is made of two different types of plastic. The bottle itself is made of what's called PET, and the cap is made of HDPE. But though they play nice to make this bottle functional, they don't work well together when you try to recycle them. Basically, each of these plastics act as an impurity for each other. If I try to recycle this PET with the HDPE, then the PET will have streaks. If I put the PET in the HDPE, then it may not have the same strength as it did before. When you mix plastic and recycling, the properties of the material changes, and that's a big problem if you're a company putting out a consistent product. Plastics need to be pure to be reliably recycled. Everything from residual food scraps, mixed plastics, or even the color of plastic could ruin the recycling process. Therefore, the plastics used for recycling have to be tightly controlled and monitored. This means your plastic bin is as appetizing to a recycling company as raisins in potato salad. Now, companies could just sort and separate all this plastic, but that costs time and money. That is why for many years, plastic waste that was recycled was just sent to other countries that used cheap, sometimes questionable labor. In fact, most products that claim to be made out of recycled material either use their own scraps from their manufacturing process or have dedicated pipelines that ensure the material collected is the right kind. So recycling won't solve our plastic problem, but we also can't just get rid of plastics either. They are what make the society we know possible. They are the clothes on our back, the computer or phone you're watching this video on, or even the sterile syringe of your vaccination. None of this is possible at this scale without plastics. So if we can't recycle and we can't get rid of them, what can we do? Well, we do both. Here's what I mean. The plastic industry is undergoing a shift, though slowly, to more sustainable products. As consumers like me and you are working to reduce the amount of plastic we buy and use, companies are researching alternatives to the plastics they currently make. This research includes looking at increasing the amount of recycled material they put into their products, making bio-based plastics, designing new plastics that are biodegradable, and improving recycling processes like engineering enzymes to eat plastic. By the way, make sure you get subscribed so you don't miss a new video I have coming soon about using nature to eat away our plastic problem. The reality is, to keep one of the greatest scientific inventions from killing us and our planet is going to take a lot of different solutions. But despite its problems, I still think plastic is one of the greatest scientific advancements in human history. The next one will probably be how we make them better, not just for us, but for Shamu too. Make sure you drop a like on this video if you enjoyed it. I'm Lumi, and thanks for coming to the Benchtop. I'll see you in the next one, and remember, keep thinking.